Hey, how's it going, everybody? My name is SockBot, and today I want to talk a little bit about aesthetics. Now, I've talked about aesthetics in probably just about every video that I've done on game design because it's such a broad topic, but today I want to talk specifically about something that I mentioned very briefly in a previous video about expanding upon aesthetics. Now, this is in relation to my most recent game, so if you haven't watched the sort of introductory video on that game, feel free to go watch that for some background, but it's not entirely required to understand this video. Today, I want to talk about taking an aesthetic that is quite specific. For example, in this one, it was the Halloween aesthetic, and expanding upon it through a little bit of research. Now, this isn't going to require you to write any sort of report, so don't worry, it's a very simple step that can hopefully help you expand a lot on the concept of your level and the visual representation of whatever sort of theme you're going for. So if you enjoy this sort of discussion tips video, feel free to leave a like down below, and feel free to subscribe to my channel if you want to see more, but no pressure as always. So let's get right into the discussion of that aesthetic, bro. Do I sound like a young person? Is it working? I hope it's working. I often am told that I sound like a grandpa, so I hope it's working. So when it comes to aesthetics, a lot of people have very specific ways of coming up with their aesthetics for the different games or levels that they're going to create, and I think that there's another category of people that have that sort of list of things they've always wanted to make once they got a game creator. Now, I kind of fell into the latter category, so I'll talk about that in a bit, but I currently fall into the former category, where I've kind of made everything that I wanted to make when I was younger, and kind of created anything that I had huge big ideas and sketched out when I was 12 years old. I'm sure there are other ones that I haven't found yet, and if I find those sketches, I will absolutely make a video on that, because that would be great content, and also I think really just generally fun to make. But today I will start off by talking about anybody out there that really just is looking for ideas. If you are this type of person, you probably have made something in Dreams before or in Little Big Planet, or you are the type of person that stumbled into Little Big Planet in Dreams and played a lot of other people's games and levels and didn't quite know how to start with something of your own. Now, I know that it can initially be very intimidating when coming into one of these games because you don't really know what to start with, and because things are so difficult, because you're spending so much time learning, you don't really know what is important enough or what's easy enough or all of these other factors to start a game, and that can often lead to just not starting at all and being too intimidated to start. So if you are that type of person, definitely I'll link a video here where I talk a little bit more about what I recommend to create first, a lot of different concepts and imagery that are easier, and types of games and genres that are easier, because those are generally the best things to start with. So if that's where you are, go start with that video first. But otherwise, I'll start off by saying if you don't have an idea for a level, I think that it's hard to tell you how to find one. I take a lot of inspiration from a number of different areas. I take a lot of inspiration from classic video games because I grew up with them. I take a lot of inspiration from modern video games, and I take a lot of inspiration from other mediums, and I try to find things that I don't think have been done within the certain medium that I'm doing. For example, I haven't seen a lot of 3D platformers that take that urban aesthetic and kind of play with it in a fun, exciting, and colorful way, because generally when you have a city level, it tends to be the more industrial level. It's a very specific process, but I think that it's really hard for me to tell you how to think of a game that hasn't been thought of yet. So instead, I'm going to start with the people that perhaps have already come up with an idea and go from there, because that is the entire point of this level, is expanding upon the aesthetic. Now, if you've come up with the game, take that game and take the aesthetic and try to boil it down to a simple phrase or a simple word. For example, my most recent one is very obvious because it's a tradition I do every year. This is my Halloween level. But I didn't want it to just be a Halloween level. I talked a little bit about that in my previous video, but I'm not going to use that as the only example here because I think that that would be unfair and not make a whole lot of sense. Now that you have that word or phrase that defines your level, take it and just plop it into Google. Plop into any search engine, because I'm not a Google affiliate here, even though I do work on YouTube. for no money, mind that, but take that and plunk it into a search engine and go ahead and look through the different images. You're going to see a lot of different things. If you are creating an entire scene within a city and you search a city, you're going to come up with a lot of skylines, and that means that you probably need to refine things a little bit more, and that stands for any other aesthetic that seems to return a lot of the same page. For example, one of the things I mentioned in my previous video was the Titanic level from Gex 64, and how amazing it was that they could expand on that aesthetic to make it unique and make different areas in the game that kept the level fresh. And so when you're Googling something, if you do run into that whole everything is the same, try to be a little bit more specific. If you're searching city, refine it to city street. If you're searching mansion, refine it to, like, pick a specific mansion. Go to the Rockefeller mansions and look at the insides of those to find a little bit more inspiration. And then once you have these varied pictures, for example, you went from Googling general suburb to Googling house to Googling mansion to Googling Rockefeller mansion, you'll see all of the interior of those. You'll see all the different rooms. If you're looking at a city street, you'll see all the storefronts and all the different aesthetics that are within those stores, if you can then take those stores and start Googling that. And from this initial Google search that you've kind of distilled your idea for, you're able to branch out into all of the different aesthetics that are within that one thing, because in the world as it is, and even in fantasy and literature, there are so many branching paths from there that you can take, as opposed to just what you would think of the second that you said Halloween level or the second that you said city level. And once you take those branches, you're going to see a lot of different stuff that doesn't really suit what you think is good for your level. Anything that just doesn't appeal for you, ignore that and pick out a few that you find interesting. And now you're going to take that and then you're going to run it through a completely different area in Dreams. And take those different concepts. For example, if you went through and found a Japanese storefront that you thought had a lot of the intrigue that you were looking for your game, perhaps because of the neon lights in front of it if it is in Japan, or because of all of the cutesy objects within inside of it. And once you take that, then take those specific words and Google them, or Google them. Here I am being clearly not an affiliate and advertising for Google all the time, but go ahead and search for those things within Dreams. This is generally how I work, because when I search Halloween in Dreams, it's just such a wide breadth of things, and honestly from there I was able to pick a lot of very interesting things for Dreams, but especially with my city level, it was just far too broad to just Google, or to just search, there we go again, to just search for a city within Dreams, because all I got was skylines. So going through this process, I was able to pick out a few more specific things and find some more specific areas, like the damaged cars that I really liked, going for parking lot instead of just city, going for cell tower instead of just industrial. All of these different specifics that you've been able to find from these Google branches and getting lost within Google are actually very good for inspiring you to create something a little bit more specific and a little bit broader in terms of the specifics that you include within your level for your entire game. Now, obviously, there's a lot of different words being thrown around here. I'm saying that things are specific and broad at the same time because it's more complicated than just saying that you can pick all of these things and shove them together. If you pick all of the individual things and place them down, you're not going to see any real aesthetic forming. And so instead of coming up with an aesthetic, you've essentially ruined it. And so from here, it's your job as a creator to fill in the gaps and to make these things make sense and to make an aesthetic that could include all of these different things. Now, often that might require that you create different parts or different sections or different areas, depending on how you call it, of your game to make those things make sense. And that's totally fine. Like I explained within my Halloween level video when I started talking about that in my previous one, I had to take those two things and split them into the graveyard section and the mansion section. But then that required me to think of a really cool way to get between them, and that actually inspired part of the gameplay that I'm doing for this level. So it's a great way to expand and to kind of just look for different bits and pieces that will fit together into your level in other stages of your creation, as opposed to just the aesthetic that you're going for. But once you have those specific things and you're starting to fill in the gaps, I guarantee you're going to run into some problems. There's going to be something that just doesn't quite fit fit in terms of the concept of your level. And by all means, if you find that there are only a few of those that you can't really make fit, feel free to delete them. But what I would say here is if you've already placed them down, if you've already gone through the process of finding them and pulling them out, there's probably a reason that you enjoy that set piece, that you enjoy that contraption that you found. And so my best suggestion would be to, if you can't form it into its own area, if you don't think that you want an entire aesthetic that's based around that item, take it and put it into a different game or save it for later. That's definitely one option. Or alternatively, look for other versions of that exact thing, and that can generally lead you to a adjacent object or an adjacent set piece that might fit your aesthetic a little bit better. A big, great example of this is when I was searching for parking lots, and I eventually stumbled upon some different street pieces, and from there I was like, oh, there's a great reason that I did this, because now I'm suddenly thinking about enormous highways, which gives me a lot of height, which will allow me to connect the parking lot that I started with in this game I was creating to the cell tower in the distance, which is the final destination, or I suppose just the highest destination within that level. And this sort of working logically through things is a great way to kind of explore your creativity without having to run into all of the roadblocks that you normally do when you're just basic brainstorming. When you're writing down ideas and trying to decide whether or not those ideas make sense, or when you're trying to sculpt different ideas to try to figure out whether or not those ideas make sense, often you can run into a lot of self-roadblocks that you're either second-guessing yourself or thinking already, does this fit, before you even place it down. And all of these things are avoided by just going step by step and dividing it into individual pieces, and then taking those pieces and making them cohesive at the end. Because once you have those pieces, you've already created most of the level, honestly. It's not the greatest time-consuming thing by any means, but now you have more of a visual representation of what your aesthetic will be. It is varied because of the branch paths that I mentioned earlier, and more importantly, it's unique because nobody else is going to think how you are, and nobody else is going to follow the same branches that you are. And even if they do, even if every single step of this along the way is identical to what your friend did or to what a professional game designer did, the individual pieces that you create and the individual sections that you force to work together by modifying them or by filling in all of the blanks, nobody is going to be able to do that in the same way that you are. Now, again, there are still roadblocks here. There's still places where you will run into issues and where you might feel discouraged, and I honestly can't prevent every bit of that, but this is a lot of how I work, and it's how I've been able to find so much more success, even through the fact that I have to deal with constant ADD throughout all of this, which I talk about a lot here, and I apologize if it does make you uncomfortable to talk about mental health, but I think it's very important to acknowledge that a lot of these issues that everybody runs into, it could be due to something greater, and it's important to give yourself a break whether or not you're dealing with something like that, because it's not like suddenly because I'm dealing with it because I have ADD, I'm the only person that's dealing with it. Other people with ADD are dealing with it, and more importantly, every type of creative person is dealing with these sorts of things on some scale or other. So that's why I like to relate it to myself, but assure you that it is not just a me problem, and something that I hope I am able to help you with in some way or other whenever you do come to this channel. But maybe that's just me getting a little bit sentimental, because it's been an emotional couple of weeks for everybody here in the US, and I think for a lot of people worldwide as well, with the Black Lives Matter movement and everything that's going on with the protests here, protesting police brutality. But I don't want to talk about that too much. I just want to mention it because it would be weird if I didn't. But I hope that I can still remain an escape for a lot of people out there that are struggling with that. And on top of that, I just hope that I can be here to help anybody that's struggling to come up with ideas or struggling to work with those ideas to make them a cohesive game. Because, well, Dreams is an escape for a lot of people. It's definitely for me, and game design has always been such a big part of my life that, well, it continues throughout this. And I can't just avoid all the things that make me happy, and I know that nobody can, so that's why I sort of treat this channel as an escape. But I just wanted to mention that at the end for anybody out there that's dealing with that. I am too, and I know that's not very important because I am the white guy here, but hopefully you're all doing well, and I hope everybody out there that is dealing with this or dealing with other stuff is just taking care of themselves right now, because it's a tough time. I don't know why I decided to add that to this video, but I think it's because in previous videos I was just a little bit too emotional to talk about it. But I'm not a robot, as much as I base my YouTube character, SockBot, off of it. But anyways, thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know how you guys come up with your aesthetics, and if this process doesn't work with you, well, let me know what does work with you, and I'll definitely give it a shot, because I like to vary my techniques from game to game, and honestly, within the same game, I tend to use multiple techniques at once for coming up with ideas. So feel free to let me know about those in the comments down below. Regardless, like the video if you like it, subscribe if you want to. No pressure as always, and I will talk to you guys in the next video. But for now, goodbye everybody.